Welcome back to another Emerald Dream card review. Today it is all about Shaman, as you can see here behind me with their new Wild God. We're going to talk about that shortly. You know, I was actually pretty hyped about Shaman initially because we got a couple nice teasers earlier in the reveals. Living Garden. This is going to imbue that hero power and have some cost reduction baked in. If you remember the imbued hero power, it's a cool evolve that scales up, you know, potentially eventually evolving stuff by 4 or 5 mana. We also had Marithra, pretty sick res effect for 8 drops. Maybe you evolve into some 8 drops and res them and so on and so forth. Pretty cool stuff. And then we got today's cards, and that's all I'll say. This is Ohn'ahra, a 9 mana 5/7 Wild God beast. It reads, at the end of your turn, play the top 3 cards from your deck. So potentially a way to cheat out like a lot of mana and really big stuff. You know, if you think about Dungard, now you'll immediately start to detect some differences there, right? Like Dungar is pulling specific stuff, and you're building your deck in a way to really manipulate that Dungar so that you know you're going to get these awesome big results, and it's this really reliable game-winning swing turn, particularly with the scary Zilliaxes and so on in Druid. With Ohn'ahra, you don't know what you're going to get. It's just the top 3 cards of your deck, which could really be anything, and that means for this to pay off reliably, you need the top 3 cards of your deck to always be, you know, nice, big payoff sorts of cards, which means your whole deck has to be stuffed with nice, big payoff sorts of cards for this to be reliable, like Dungar. And that's not possible because you just have to run low-cost cards. You have to have things to do in the early game, so you're not just going to hit like 3 giant minions off your Ohn'ahra all the time. Now, Ohn'ahra is like a little bigger itself, of course. It's also repeatable turn after turn. We don't really think that's that relevant, though, in modern Hearthstone. Cards just pretty much always kind of get cleared. There's just so much removal. You'll either win or they'll clear it, and multiple future turns probably aren't just a consideration. You make maybe 1 out of 50 times, 1 out of 100 games or something that's relevant, just not often enough to be the reason to run the card. So you just can't guarantee the reliability. On top of that, of course, keep in mind, any battle cries, you lose the battle cry. Even though it says play, that's not how battle cries work. Battle cries have to be played by you from hand. So if you have battle cry minions in your deck, Ohn'ahra is just going to summon the stats, not the battle cry, which, you know, immediately stuff like Marithra, for instance, if this was in your deck, she's just going to be a 4/4, right? She's not going to go off. So you've already got like restrictions on restrictions kind of trying to support this Ohn'ahra game plan. Now, we are going to see a card here in a second in this review, Beanstalk Brute, which, you know, buffs the top 3 minions of your deck. And you might say, okay, nice. Get an extra 12/12 guaranteed. If I play Beanstalk Brute, well, I guess actually you can't really play them in the same turn realistically. So maybe you get +8/+8 guaranteed at least for your Ohn'ahra. If you play the Brute, get some buffs, then you get the top 3 things out of your deck or whatever, right? There's kind of something there to guarantee more stats, but then sometimes you'll pull a Beanstalk Brute and you'll be really sad because you've pulled a Battlecry minion that's now only a 4/4, and you've kind of, again, got those restrictions and counter synergies baked into the deck building process. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is you have to lower the ceiling of expectations a little bit for the Ohn'ahra results, because sometimes you're going to get 2-cost cards. Sometimes you're going to get 4-cost cards. Maybe you get one big thing if you've stuffed your deck with quite a few. It's just not going to have the like guaranteed swing of something like Dungar. On top of that, of course, as a 9-mana card, not in Druid, it's also not going to come down as early as Dungar, which was getting cheated into play so significantly. That's the sort of stuff that made a card like Dungar a real win condition. This can't exist in that same space. It's just not got the recipe to work that well and that reliably. So instead, this is kind of just like a big bonus almost. It's not a build around, which can be fine. Like, that's okay if you have a deck that's otherwise sufficiently sturdy, has like control tools, lives into the late game. Ohn'ahra could be just a solid card. But then you also just worry like, okay, I'm running, say, board clears. And we're actually going to see this really big board clear in this video, Typhoon, right? So you think, okay, this is a card I could run in my Ohn'ahra deck to have some stabilization. Well, you don't want this to get played automatically off your Ohn'ahra, right? Because you can just wipe out the board that you're trying to build. So again, it's like, how do you build a control deck with removal tools and stabilization cards that just kind of works with something like Ohn'ahra, where it doesn't potentially backfire really hard. You could try to build like, you know, Frosty Decor is a great card. We're going to see another card in this video too. Spirits of the Forest here. This one kind of just works, but it's actually a choose one. So even it's not reliably defensive, because yeah, sometimes the Ohn'ahra random play will get the Wolves, and sometimes it'll get the Falcons that give you Wind Fury. And it's like, well, okay, that's not even a reliably defensive card off Ohn'ahra. So it becomes apparent quickly how many things just don't really work well off Ohn'ahra, either from an in-game standpoint or from like a deck construction standpoint. And I see a real challenge trying to find things where Ohn'ahra feels like she kind of reasonably pays off. My hair is driving me crazy. I'm sorry. So can you really scramble together 29 other cards that work well for this, that somehow cheat this out? Or is this one of those cards that just, you know, maybe it kind of exists off evolution pools and that's fine, and it's a cool card, and it's just really hard to work a deck around this and maybe even fit it into a deck? I think that's probably the case. Like, a fun, exciting card can definitely have some big moments. I just don't see myself building a reliable game plan out of this, even in a bigger, you know, rotation with like 6 sets. Maybe you get closer with spells and cards that just kind of work, but I think it's still going to be a struggle, and I just don't know that the payoff's there for a big old 9-mana card like this. All right, so moving on to this Beanstalk Brute Fella, a 5-mana 4/4 elemental with battle cries. You saw give +4/+4 to the top 3 minions in your deck. So we already talked about, you know, this is maybe kind of okay with Ohn'ahra, but I don't really think that works from a cost standpoint, a sequencing standpoint, a deck building standpoint. I'm not really giving this an out with Ohn'ahra. I just don't think that's why this card gets played. So is this just like generally good? Do you just play this on turn 5 and hope to get there with these, you know, these deck buffs? Don't necessarily love that either. Deck buff cards have not really succeeded. In fact, in the modern era, most of these style cards now buff like the deck, the board, and the hand, because that's what you need to like, kind of keep up, you know. Basically delaying these behind draws, you know, pushes all the upside of this back, and in the meantime you're just really taking almost a pass on your turn 5 with just a 4/4 that it's hard to realize a consistent payoff here. Plus you just don't know what it's going to buff, and like sometimes you can have cards that really pay off that buff right away. There are like, you know, summon a copy of this with taunt style cards that would be amazing, right? But you're not always going to hit those on time. It's just random stuff in your deck that you can't see, you can't plan around. You might get a 1-drop that's garbage, you might get a 9-drop that's unplayable, you know, for 3 turns. It's just so inconsistent in its results. You know, I do like that this kind of condenses the buffs down into the top 3 cards instead of like the whole deck getting +1/+1. You know, you're narrowing that window so that you're getting all of the stats sooner. That said, it's still just the top 3 minions in your deck. So if you're running any spells, which virtually every deck does run a handful of spells at least, you know, you might still have like 2 or 3 spells in your next 3 cards and then hit a wave of minions. So you might be pushing it back a few draws extra, maybe even multiple turns. Or, you know, you might only get 1 minion and then kind of 2 spells. It will still buff, like it'll still continue to move down the line to buff based on this wording. It'll just always find the top 3 minions, but those might not be the top 3 cards. So that's still going to realize a delay for you. Then you talk about stuff like maybe Shutter Block to like magnify these buffs and create even more crazy stats, but that's just pushing it all back even past turn 6 till later. And it's just like, man, these 4/4 buffs just aren't going to be competitive, you know, into turn 8, into turn 9 with all the crazy things that happen in Hearthstone. You need to be really turning the corner and winning the game at that stage, not still just establishing all these buffs. And I'm just thinking about too, like hand buff Pally, you know, like it's getting 4/4 buffs in hand by the mid game, and the cards are in hand and they're getting played. You know, the hand buff Pally we've been dealing with for the last couple of years is so much faster than this. So this card just feels really old school to me. It feels really far behind. I just don't see how this ever gets there. Even the weird counter synergies with Ohn'ahra a little bit is all just, I don't know. This makes this feel very, very clunky. Speaking of clunky cards, it's Emerald Bounty. 2-mana spell here, draw 2 cards. You can't play them for 2 turns, which, I mean, man, that sucks. that's a big downside, right? You know, I think there is an era where this would have been acceptable because 2 for 2 would have felt so efficient that you'd been like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, this is just like, I'll to just have a really efficient card draw play. These days, there's just really efficient card draw across the board. I will say maybe Shaman has a little less than other classes, but still better options than this. There's like neutral cards, I think, that are just better options than this. So many ways I'd rather spend the 2 mana. Like the whole point of card draw, right, is finding things to do. Particularly like if you top deck this on turn 8 and you just need plays, it's just a dead card, right? Like the game's gonna be over by the time you get to play these cards. So you just need your card draw cards to work in a pinch and work early. And this one's like kind of okay that it sort of works early, right? You know, spend the mana and get the payoff later, but it's just not that efficient for that. A little bit more efficient than normal, and then just really bad anytime else. You know, anytime you need that in a pinch, problem solver, this cannot provide that. So just too punishing to work with. I think this card gets forgotten very quickly. So moving on to Spirits of the Forest, big 5 mana nature spell here. Pretty cool. Choose one, summon 3 2/3 wolves with taunt, or summon 2 4/3 falcons with Wind Fury. Which I love the art on this. Very cool artwork. Showing all 5 together is fun. As far as card quality is concerned, man, I just really don't want to be a downer, but I am not in love with this one either, dude. Like, this just doesn't feel that good for me, right? Like, compared to, you know, I don't know, Feral Spirit, you get 1 extra wolf, you know, but you're paying a little more, even considering any overload stuff. Compared to Frosty Decor, it's just not nearly as good defensively, I don't think. Like Frosty Decor, you guys know this card, I think, but here. 2/4 elementals that gain you 4 armor. Like, I'd pretty much always rather have this than the 2/3. Sometimes more valuable in certain matchups. Like, it just doesn't compete there. So does the flexibility this offers provide any upside? Like, are you sometimes really excited to get 2 4/3 Falcons with Wind Fury instead? Most decks tend to lean in one direction and kind of prefer that direction. They either want to be aggressive or they want to be defensive. But anyway, 2 4/3 Falcons on turn 5, this is just going to die, dude. 3 health is not enough going into your opponent's turn 5 or 6 to stabilize. If you just use incredibly cheap spells to remove the 4/3s, no problem. If you're ahead on board, you know, they still find ways to answer it right. They can, of course, a little bit better, but then if you're ahead on board, that typically implies you've been playing a deck that is faster. Is this the turn 5 follow-up you want if you're ahead on board? Probably not, right? So I think this is naturally going to lean into more defensive decks or things like the Wolves. That's what you really want to play if you're behind on board, but I don't think 2/3 Wolves trade in well at all on turn 5. They just get value traded a bunch. I'd rather have the Frosty Decor or just, like, you know, a board clear, as opposed to just throwing down a bunch of 2/3 bodies. So in other words, like, this all just feels insufficient by turn 5 from a health total standpoint, from a threat standpoint, from a defense standpoint. I don't really think any of these line up all that well. I mean, it is just a pile of stuff, and sometimes that's okay. Like, but I think, again, this is more of like a random generation card. I grabbed this off a random thing, and I got 3 wolves, and I'm happy. I don't really think I want to play this necessarily in decks. So next up is Aspect's Embrace. Beautiful art here. She looks so cool. Spell, man, I don't know. It's 2 mana spell, restore 4 health, and imbue your hero power, which I was really excited about the imbued hero powers for Shaman. Like, I thought this Evolve core looked pretty cool, and the first imbue card we saw, which I teased earlier in the video, I thought that looked awesome. The garden guy, this guy again, I'll remind you, living garden, right? Like, I was really excited about this one. This looked great, like exactly what you want for imbue. Don't love Aspect's Embrace so much because you often want to play this like on turn 2. You want to get imbuing as quickly as you can. There is a 2-drop neutral imbue we saw that's, you know, preferable, and you'll probably be running both. If you have that one in hand, sure. This one's a little bit harder to guarantee that this 4 health is really going to do anything for you on turn 2. I think this is very often going to say like restore 1 health or 2 health and imbue your hero power, which it's not bad. Like, obviously, if imbue is good enough, you will still absolutely run this. This card will still absolutely get played. I think you'll just kind of feel bad about playing it a lot of the times. It's going to feel like the worst card in your imbue package, but it's just a necessary evil. You'll just be like, God, I really wish I'd gotten the minion instead. And then even late game, like, you know, 4 health is fine. It's a free bonus, but it's still not the kind of like tempo you're probably looking for, or a minion to utilize with your freshly imbued hero power. Like, that's the great thing about the new neutral guy is like, hey, not only is this a way to you know, juice up the hero power an extra step, but it's a body that I can then use the hero power on. So it's like, I got to find more mana to make more stuff to imbue. So like I do think this will get played because I still kind of believe in this hero power package a little bit, but I think this is the worst card in that package for sure. And this card's kind of interesting for the Imbue package. This is the Plucky Podling, a 1 mana 1/2. If this would transform into a minion, it transforms into one that costs 2 more. And we think that probably means 2 more than the minion it would transform into, not itself. So it's not like this always turns into a 3-drop. It's more like if this were going to get evolved into a 5-drop, instead it's going to become a 7-drop, which clearly helps you accelerate your hero power. Imbued evolves even further, even faster. And this is just a great little guy to keep in hand. It's like, okay, like I'm probably not ever playing this on turn 1. I'm sitting on this in hand until I get a satisfying Imbue or a moment where I really need something. Then this is that 1 mana overhead with the Imbue hero power. I take that 3 cost play and I maybe get a random 6-drop, 7-drop, 8-drop, etc. off the Plucky Podling, giving you a little bit of like recovery of sorts by spending all your tempo and mana imbuing so far. This helps you close the gap. Maybe you even get like a big 10-drop or something before too long. And you hope to stabilize off the back of that. So I do think this is nice little fuel for that Imbue deck. It's not the craziest card we've ever seen, but any evolved stuff beyond Imbue 2 that gets printed later or whatever, Plucky Podling's a solid fit for. So ultimately, this looks pretty okay compared to most of what we've seen. So we've also got here the Glowroot Lure. This is a 6 mana 6/6 taunt that costs 1 less each time you use your hero power this game, which kind of gives you like Thing from Below vibes, you know, 6-drop taunt that gets reduced. Now that was based on totem summons, which is kind of a hero power, but of course a lot of other ways to summon totems as well. This one's not going to have any of that like bonus discount happening more quickly, you know. It is just per hero power, which usually means kind of once per turn at best, maybe not even that, because you know you're not always going to be hero power. You're going to be spending mana imbuing and stuff because it's clearly designed again for the Imbue deck. It takes 12 mana basically to get this down to 0. Even like 8 mana to get this down to 2. Man, I really want this to be the support piece for an Imbue Shaman because I really wanted to like that deck, but I don't think this comes online quickly enough. I think this is a card that's going to be hitting on like, I don't know, turn like 8 or 9 or something, and it's maybe still going to cost a little bit. It's not even reliably going to be free. So I don't know, dude. I'm not totally in love with this one either. It's again, maybe it goes in the deck just for lack of other good things to do, but it's not even really like a good evolve target necessarily, you know? It's not like you want to necessarily evolve these stats away. A random 8-drop or 10-drop or whatever off this might not be that reliably better. So again, it's just an awkward fit. I'm like kind of sad by these Shaman cards. I'm also talking quieter because my baby is napping. If it sounds like I'm like depressed or quiet, that's why. But just I'm not super convinced on this one either, man. All right, so our final card here is Typhoon. As we saw earlier, this is a 10 mana spell, and its nature, each minion gets shuffled into a random player's deck, which is definitely a nice big universal removal card. Let's be clear, right? Some boards this will feel absolutely fine to play. You just have to remove the board. You desperately need to deal with scary stuff. Solves any problems with reborns or death rattles as well because the things are getting shuffled, not being killed. So that's cool, right? Like it is useful. Let's be clear. Like it is useful sometimes, but man, it doesn't feel good compared to even Psychic Scream, which came out like, I don't know, like 6 years ago or something, right? 7 mana here, so way cheaper. What happens way sooner because 10 mana is like, man, a lot of times the boards you need to clear are going to be happening on turn 6 or 7 or 8. Typhoon is just too far away, right? That's going to be tough. Also, this shuffles into your opponent's deck, which is generally a good thing. You want the garbage on board to go into your only like amazing high value legendaries that they're happy to get an extra copy of. Usually there's little 1/1s and garbage and fodder and totems and like little junk on board. And you want that to go into your opponent's deck so that they are, number one, less likely to draw their other real cards. You know, the real cards are now going to be mixed in with 5 or 6 bad cards. So the chances of them hitting a real card might go down by half or something. But then, you know, they're just going to draw garbage totems and stuff too. So you're polluting your opponent's deck very little fatigue protection. But those things don't usually win you a game. It's usually about, you know, the efficiency of hitting your deck's game plan, combo, synergy as quickly as possible. This delays that. With Psychic Scream anyway. With Typhoon, you're polluting your own deck half the time. And, you know, if there's a mix of totems and garbage and 1/1s and a mix of high value legendaries, sometimes you might win on that exchange. Sometimes you might lose. Sometimes you might give your opponent the one awesome legendary, give yourself 7 random 1/1s or whatever, and completely ruin your deck, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a little chaos or randomness there, but when you're the one playing the card, it sure would be nice to know out of it as opposed to this. Now, you know, it's okay that Shaman doesn't get as good of removal as Priest. It's totally fine that classes have, you know, different efficiencies and different strengths and weaknesses or whatever. But, you know, just thinking about the game in general, Typhoon at 10 mana just feels really late these days, you know. Crazy battle cruiser boards off Rainer and stuff coming down before turn 10. That's when I want the Typhoon. So it's not just about like, is it good for Shaman versus is it good for Priest? It's about, is it good for Hearthstone in a modern meta? And I don't think so, you know, like you're gonna have to find other tools, like maybe running one of these in a deck sometimes could be okay just because you need a big universal removal, but boy, it is not the best at that either. Like, it's okay, I think, again, but it's just, it does not compare favorably to the game as it exists today. So yeah, all that said, let's depressingly rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Ohn'ahra is a 3-star card. Beanstalk Brute is a 2-star card. Emerald Bounty is a 1-star card. Spirits of the Forest is a 2-star card. Aspect's Embrace is a 3-star card. Plucky Podling is a 4-star card. Glowroot Lure is a 2-star card. Typhoon is a 3-star card, and only barely because I think you can kind of run one of these, but really kind of also a 2-star card, to be honest. Well, there you go. That's the Shaman set. I went from being really hyped to not very hyped for Shaman real quick there. You know, that said, there was a little patch notes and teaser today that talked about doing kind of a balance pass to lower the power level of older cards in standard format so that these new cards have more of a chance to shine. Might help Shaman a little bit. You know, we can't just bump the scores up hoping that takes. We have to review what we know. But, you know, even saying that, I think these Shaman cards are just worse than other Emerald Dream cards. Like, I don't think they're going to beat out even the other new cards. So I don't have a lot of hope either way. That said, maybe you disagree. So share your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.